All right, get ready for a wild ride, because today we're diving headfirst into the future of Swiss cities.
Buckle up.
Yeah, seriously, time travel is involved because we're going all the way to 2070
That's right, and let me tell you.
to see what urban planners have dreamed up.
Yeah, it's some really cool stuff.
I am so here for it.
So we're getting the inside scoop from ETH Zurich. They have this incredible design studio.
Oh, I read about that. It's like a think tank, right?
Exactly, where students tackle these really complex urban planning challenges.
And they're thinking way ahead, like decades into the future,
Yeah, they're not just planning for the next 5 or 10 years, they're thinking long term.
which is really what we need.
Absolutely, especially with all the rapid changes happening in the world.
And we've got the goods.
Yeah,
Their Aufgabenstellung CAS3 document.
their playbook, basically.
Yeah, it's like a blueprint for the whole design studio.
It lays out the challenges, the methods, everything.
Plus, we're tapping into insights from ETH RAUM, the platform behind this whole program.
They're doing some really innovative work in the field of urban planning.
Okay, so before we get lost in the details, give me the big picture.
Okay, so imagine.
What will these Swiss cities actually look like in 2070?
All right, so picture this. Cities that are not just surviving, but thriving in the face of climate change.
Okay, that's a given, right? Like every city is going to have to be sustainable.
Right, but they're taking it to a whole new level. Buildings that are practically breathing, adapting to extreme weather.
Whoa, hold on. How does a building breathe?
Well, think about things like responsive facades that adjust to light and temperature, or green roofs that act as natural insulation.
Oh, I see what you mean. So it's like integrated systems.
Exactly, and then entire neighborhoods powered by renewable energy, maybe even energy self-sufficient.
Okay, now that's just cool, but are we talking flying cars and stuff?
Well, maybe not flying cars.
Because honestly, where would you even park those in Switzerland?
Right. Space is at a premium, but
But it's still got to be uniquely Swiss.
yeah, absolutely. And that's what's so fascinating about this whole project. It's Swiss precision meets urban futurism.
I like it. It's like a match made in, well, in the future.
Right. So, for example, the studio requires students to focus on areas with existing green spaces.
They're big on preserving nature, right?
Exactly. So it's not about just creating these shiny new futuristic cities from scratch. It's about working with what they already have.
So it's about reimagining it through this futuristic lens.
Yeah, they're pushing students to think about how to maximize those spaces. Could they become self-sustaining urban farms? Could they integrate seamlessly with new sustainable transportation systems?
It's like a puzzle, but with the future of a city at stake.
And with incredibly high stakes, considering the challenges that lie ahead.
Speaking of challenges, let's talk about the how. Because planning for something that's 50 years out, that's a whole other level. I can barely plan my dinner for tonight. So how do these students wrap their heads around that?
That's where it gets really interesting. They use this method called backcasting.
Backcasting. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So instead of taking what we know now and kind of projecting it forward, which is how we usually do it.
Which makes sense. It's linear.
Right. But it can be limiting. With backcasting, they start with their ideal outcome, that thriving Swiss city in 2070, and work backward.
So they're essentially saying, this is what we want. Now, how do we get there?
Exactly. It flips the whole planning process on its head.
I love it. It's like reverse engineering, but for cities.
Yes. And it allows for so much more creativity and ambition because you're not limited by today's constraints.
You're not just trying to incrementally improve on what already exists.
Right. You're free to think big and then connect those big ideas to tangible steps.
This backcasting thing is pretty mind-blowing. I'm already trying to apply it to my own life. But back to these students. They're not just handed this backcasting method and told, go forth and plan. What kind of structure does the studio actually provide?
Oh, it's definitely structured. Think of it like a scaffolding, you know?
Okay, I like that. A support system for their big ideas.
Exactly. So the studio is built around different modules, right?
Makes sense. Break it down into manageable chunks.
Yeah, and each one focuses on a key aspect of urban planning.
So always with that 2070 lens, right?
Always. They're constantly looking ahead, figuring out how to get to that ideal future city.
Okay, so give me the rundown. What are these modules? What are these future city shapers learning?
Well, they cover a huge range of areas, and it's super interdisciplinary.
As it should be, right? I mean, cities are complex.
Oh, totally. So, for example, there's a whole module on digital and operational competency.
So, like, how to use technology to make cities smarter.
Exactly. Things like smart grids, data analysis, all of that.
Can't really talk about the future without tech, right?
No way. It's totally intertwined. Then there's a module on urban governance.
Okay, so that's the nuts and bolts, right? Like, how do you actually implement these grand plans?
Yeah, it's about policy, decision-making, all the stuff that makes things actually happen.
Because what good is a brilliant plan if it just stays on paper?
Exactly. And then, of course, a huge one, a module on climate change and biodiversity.
I was waiting for that one. That's got to be front and center.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about tackling those environmental challenges head on.
So it's not just about designing these cool futuristic buildings.
No way, it's about the whole ecosystem.
It's about creating cities that are truly livable, sustainable.
Yes. And equitable, too. They really emphasize that social aspect as well.
Which is huge because we don't want to create a future where only some people benefit.
Exactly. It has to be for everyone. But, it's not all lectures and theory.
Oh, good, because
But-
that sounds kind of boring.
Right. They actually have this really cool component called sparring partner sessions.
Barring partners. Okay, now I need details.
So basically, students pair up and they critique each other's projects.
Oh, so it's like peer review, but maybe a little more intense?
Yeah. They give each other feedback, push each other to refine their ideas.
I bet that gets pretty lively.
Oh, I'm sure. But it's such a valuable experience to have to defend your ideas and get that outside perspective.
Totally. And it's probably way more fun than just getting feedback from a professor.
Right. They're learning from each other, challenging each other, and ultimately making their project stronger.
It's like a collaborative brainstorming session, but with, like, real stakes.
Exactly. And speaking of collaboration, they also bring in experts from different fields.
Oh, so it's not just academics in an ivory tower.
No, they've got architects, engineers, policymakers, all sorts of people working with the students.
I love that. It brings in that real-world perspective.
Yeah, because it's one thing to design something on paper, it's another to actually make it happen in the real world.
Okay, so speaking of making it happen, what's the final exam for a studio like this?
I was wondering the same thing. Do they have to build a mini city or something?
That would be amazing, but I doubt they have the budget for that.
Right. Actually, the document mentions they present their visions in a visual format.
Like a presentation,
Even simpler, a poster.
a poster. Seems a little low-tech for a studio focused on the future.
I know, right? But here's the thing. The document doesn't say how they should create these posters.
So it's open to interpretation.
Exactly. They could do hand-drawn illustrations, digital collages. They could even get really creative and incorporate interactive elements.
Oh, I like that. So it's less about technical drawing skills and more about communicating their vision in a way that's engaging and impactful.
Exactly. Because remember, these students are being trained to be leaders in their field.
They need to be able to sell their ideas, right?
Exactly. They have to convince stakeholders, policymakers, even the public to get on board with their visions.
It's like pitching their vision for the future, but instead of investors, they're trying to win over citizens.
I like that analogy. It's like urban planning Shark Tank.
Right. But even with a killer presentation, you need substance? So how do they actually measure the success of these projects? What are the judges looking for?
Well, innovation and creativity are definitely key, according to the document.
Makes sense. They want to see fresh thinking.
Yeah, unconventional approaches, designs that really push the boundaries of urban planning.
So they're looking for that wow factor.
Definitely.
But it can't just be about outlandish ideas, right?
Oh, absolutely not. It has to be grounded in reality.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, the document also emphasizes practicality.
Which makes sense, because you can't just dream up something and call it a day.
Exactly. It's about demonstrating that you've actually thought through the how.
So, like the steps involved, the resources needed?
All of that. And also potential roadblocks,
Because there are always roadblocks.
Always. And that's where that backcasting method comes in.
Right, so you're not just presenting a pie-in-the-sky idea.
Right. You're showing how you get from point A to point B, from today to that ideal future.
It's like, here's the dream, and here's the roadmap to get there.
Exactly. And of course, they're also looking at the quality of the research.
Of course, that's a given.
Yeah, the analysis of the chosen area, how well they've integrated what they've learned.
Because they're trying to create something that's actually feasible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be more than just a pretty picture.
So it's like the ultimate test of their urban planning skills.
I'd say so. But instead of multiple choice questions, they're tackling these real-world challenges.
With the potential to actually shape the future of Swiss City.
Exactly. And you know what else they emphasize in the document?
What's that?
The importance of anticipating conflicts.
Oh, right, because not everyone is going to be happy about change, even if it's for the better.
Exactly. And resistance to these urban transformations. It's about understanding that urban planning isn't just about buildings and infrastructure.
Right. It's about people.
Exactly. It's about navigating different perspectives, finding common ground.
And building consensus, which can be messy.
Oh, totally. But it's an essential part of creating lasting change, you know?
Absolutely, because you can't just impose a vision on people. It has to be a collaborative process.
Exactly. And I think it's really great that they're preparing students for that reality.
Yeah, it's giving them the tools not just to design the future, but to actually make it happen.
And to bring people along with them.
Now it's got me thinking about my own city.
Me too.
And the potential for change,
Yeah, it's inspiring, right?
Definitely. So for our listeners who are feeling that spark, who want to reimagine their own cities, what advice would you give them? Where do they even begin?
Well, I'd say start simple. Pick a place.
Like their favorite park.
Exactly. Or street they love, or even just their own block.
Make it personal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then imagine, what could this space be like in 2070? What would make it even better?
I love that. And you know what? Don't do it alone. Grab a friend, a neighbor, your kids.
Yes. Have those sparring partner sessions, brainstorm together.
Because who knows what amazing ideas you might come up with when you put your heads together.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about, realizing that we all have a role to play in shaping our cities.
Even in small ways, right?
Exactly. It's about reclaiming that power of imagination and using it to create the future we want.
Beautifully said. Well, on that inspiring note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the future of Swiss cities.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on this journey to 2070 and beyond. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and more information.
And keep dreaming big.
Until next time.